Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another webinar by Royal Cyber. Our topic for today is metadata management using best practices. My name is Pratik Nilkund, and I'll be your speaker for today. Just some housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the chat window, and we will address them towards the end of our presentation. Also, if anyone is not able to view my screen or hear me properly, kindly notify me in the chat window. Now, before we start, I want to talk about a little bit about Royal Cyber and today's agenda. We are an IT consulting and digital transformation company, and since 2002, we have successfully completed over 1,500 projects for 600 plus happy clients. We've gained significant recognition from our customers and partners worldwide over the years, including some Fortune 500 companies for providing best in class services and solutions across multiple domains, and have received many different awards during the process. We are a team of 1,000 skilled resources, and although we have our headquarters in United States, we are globally distributed and provide various delivery centers across the globe. Basis this, clients can leverage the offshore onshore benefits of our services. We offer end-to-end services right from assessing the as is state and uh, design of our current implementations, identify the value add use cases. Thereafter, we develop and prioritize implementation and expansion roadmaps, explore custom integrations, and finally provide training and rollout assistance. This is how the agenda looks like for today. Um, we will start with an overview of metadata before identifying some of the metadata use cases, after which we will be looking at some of the strategies for a metadata management program. Thereafter, we will take a deep dive into the key criterion for evaluating a tool for metadata management. We will then sum up the webinar by answering some of the questions we received today during this webinar. All right, so let's get started. So, whenever I think or visualize metadata, I like to imagine a large library with hundreds of thousands of books and magazines, but no card catalog, right? So, without the card catalog, finding a specific book in the library would be difficult, if not impossible. An organization without metadata is like a library without a card catalog. You can also look at it as a Google for your enterprise. And one question that a lot of employees have or would have is, if Google can deliver results across the entire internet in seconds, why do I have so much trouble finding things in my organization? On the screen is an example of metadata, right? So if we look at this image, we can spot some labels here, like we know who the author is, we know the content of the tweet, we know the number of retweets, We also can spot some embedded metadata like date or time, location, language, what were the devices used, ID of the tweet, etc. So this is not the data itself, but the headers or the attributes that define data, right? So it's the data about data. This provides context to this image, and this is an example of a social media metadata, right? So metadata helps us to understand, uh, and this is again as it relates to the importance of metadata or the purpose of metadata within an organization. It helps to provide context, and it helps to understand if the data is discoverable, if the data is understandable, and if the data is accessible. So if I were to talk about the discoverable aspect of data, I'm talking about questions like who is using this data, who is the steward of this data, where was this data created, where is this data stored, right? So data may be anywhere and everywhere within an organization, but finding what you need can be challenging, right? So that's partly due to the complexity of modern information landscapes, and partly due to the decades of manual efforts to categorize and organize highly diverse sets of data. So the end result is siloed or fragmented view of the enterprise, and poor ability to find data when you need it, therefore uh, lowering the value of reporting and analytics, right? When we talk about the understandable aspect of data, we're talking about again the context of it, the business context of where the data come from, um, who is using this data, what is the value that is being generated out of the data, what is the meaningful analysis that is um, a part of this data, who is, why are we storing this data exactly, are there any regional privacy or security policies that regulate this data, or are there any business drivers for using this data, what are the business rules for this data, and what is the security level or privacy level of this data, are all the different questions that come up when understanding the data better. When we talk about accessibility, we're talking about where is the data stored, which application do I need to access, and how do I access the data, right? So uh, this is more about the administrative and the accessibility part of data. So again, that is again a part of the broad definition of metadata, and the purpose of why metadata is important to an organization. So here are a couple of metadata resources, and two very important metadata resources, which is the business glossary and the data dictionary. The data is sometimes the data dictionary is sometimes denoted as technical metadata, whereas the business glossary is a part of, say, the business metadata, right? um, when we talk about, here is an example of customer, which is a business term, and there are many different databases and systems and tables that it may be a part of, but there needs to be a linkage that links the technical metadata to the business metadata, right? So to give you an example, right, a manufacturing business, the manufacturing business people may want to look for information about raw materials, right? And for that, all they know is raw materials as a business term, but they do not know which resources will have information on raw materials. So uh, that is where they will have heavy dependency on the technical team. But if there is some functionality or process within the company where just by entering the term you can understand the you know the technical aspects of it and where this information is present, then it helps the business people get the most by digging deeper into the technical aspects of it, but at the same time keep the technical layer in a way abstracted, right? So that is the purpose of the combination of business glossary as it relates to data dictionary, to have business definition descriptions as it relates to the data in underlying systems and databases. So now that we understand uh, what metadata is, right, let us look at a few use cases for business metadata use case and as well as a technical metadata use case. So as we discussed, business metadata provides the meaning of data by defining terms in everyday language without regard to the technical implementation of it, right? So data literacy is a use case, and one of the cornerstones of any data strategy is data literacy. The smartest of the companies are trying to catalog so that there is a self-service data marketplace to rapidly get the right data to the right people, to support an increasingly growing volume of data literate workforce, right? So when we talk about uh, data literacy, let's take up an example here, right? So we especially during the pandemic, we relied heavily on the simplicity and convenience of shopping online, right? Sort of like a global virtual marketplace, that is increasingly replacing the physical stores and malls and all of that. So when we shop for everything online, like groceries, clothing, and entertainment, right? Um the experience is seamless due to a very sophisticated integration of a catalog for shopping and perhaps a robust supply chain with it, right? So now is a time when making or data available to everyone within a company should be as simple as downloading new music, right? So and smart companies are actually embracing this kind of simple self-service by embracing metadata management. Another use case is probably regulatory compliance, right? So metadata is required to place the data into proper categories as well for determining which regulations are applied to it. For example, when we talk about SOX, it applies to financial data. When we talk about HIPAA, it applies to healthcare data. CCPA applies to the personal information of California residents, and so on. Right? So some data will apply to multiple regulations, and some data will not be regulated at all. Right? So without proper metadata definitions, it's impossible to apply regulatory compliance of data. So CCPA was one of the first laws relating to privacy within United States, but we know that there are a lot of states drafting these laws, and it is very important that companies are flexible and fast in terms of adapting to these changing rules, and these changing regulations, right? So that those fines, heavy fines, can be avoided. We're also talking about data redundancy check, and which is an important use case. Again, for metadata management, we are talking about building trust in data, right? So um, we can easily eliminate data redundancies or duplications, um, because now the metadata is tagged, and we can understand through different tags what are the, or we can identify what are the redundancies, with respect to data across systems. So that way we can add more efficiency to the data management processes within an organization, and bring about agility, excuse me, to the needs of the changing data infrastructure. um, a couple of three different metadata use cases are also analytics governance, data origin and impact analysis, as well as development standards, right? So technical metadata is again relating to the data dictionary aspect of it, wherein we try to define the uh, systems, databases, tables, columns, files, all of that, so that um, we kind of understand what the, since the data goes through a series of transformations across the enterprise through the in the data landscape, we can identify what which of the uh, reports are impacted by a change in a data. Because again, if you talk about a Tableau report, right, it's made up of different report attributes which are sourced uh, through certain databases or Excel sheets. But we also have to be confident that these data elements are what we need, and it is what it is, and how it feeds the report is extremely critical from an analytics standpoint, right? We are also talking about data origin and impact analysis, and some of the questions here that pop up here are: what happens if the structure of a table in a data source is modified, right? And what are all the reports that are impacted, right? So an analogy to impact analysis is a game of chess, right? For example, before a chess match begins, there is order, right? The board is symmetrical, um, the pieces are lined up beautifully in the rightful spots, and everything is perfect. However, once the first move is made, there is no more order, right? So the first move has a direct impact on the outcome of the next move. Similar to chess, where every move impacts the next, a small physical change to data storage or movement can impact the flow of data upstream or downstream, right? So as a business user, it becomes very critical to be aware of the changes, so that we only take what we need. The business user can only take what he needs in uh, identifying the impact to reports and business decisions. Thirdly, development standards is also a very important use case, because uh, SQLs especially are embedded in the reports, right? So uh, there is a good chance that data integration platforms can indicate bad programming practices. So those can be used to drive the creation of uh, development standards to increase efficiency. So technical metadata plays an important role here, wherein you can understand also the technical lineage, the different transformations, and um, how what are the different there can be a documentation of the changing or the transformations within the tool itself, rather than having something separately documented manually. A lot of it can be charted out through having a good tool that does the technical lineage. All right, so now that we have looked at some of the use cases, let's head on to what are the strategies that go into creating a metadata management program, right? So we'll first look at defining the audience for metadata solution, understand and scope the data landscape, define the different business drivers to implement a minimum viable plan, and then outline a roadmap focusing on business value. So if we look at audience, we're looking at essentially technical users and business users, right? So one of the first things that I would recommend is doing a heat map of you know um, inventorying all of the data sources, right? So if you have relational databases, what are these um, relational databases, and um which of the departments within the organization use or leverage that particular relational database. Similarly, if you're using BI tools like Tableau or ClickView or Power BI, right? How are these? How are the different departments, utilizing these BI tools, right? So this kind of helps to understand which of the databases or BI tools or open data sets are like most used across departments within an enterprise. Um, when we talk about business users, also we are talking about you know a RACI matrix, a kind of a RACI matrix to understand um, you know how different tasks like data ownership, policies and standards, business rules and guidelines, how do they um, affect the different committees and council members and stewards within an organization. So that kind of helps to understand what is the first use case that needs to be taken up, and uh, you know uh, having that first 0 to 1 of metadata management defined. So these are a few important steps, initial steps that can be taken. Then we are looking at scoping the data landscape, right? um, it's very important to understand what is to be done, right? And it's very important to not underdo or overdo something, right? A good way to reach there is to scope the data landscape. We need to take up which are we need to identify which are the data entities that are widely used and very critical to the business, right? So, and they should be the ones who receive the highest priority, should be fully documented, and with lineages built out, right? Everything which is carefully versioned, so that we don't miss out on anything. So we're typically talking about uh, uh, master data, like customer or for product or for location, taking one of it and then building it out. um, so we're also looking at some common attributes like customer name and account ID, and a customer address that is applicable to uh, many different metrics within an organization. So these again should be highly governed and highly published and documented and shared as well. So um, these are the usual suspects, when the first suspects then that come to mind when we talk about the initial uh, scoping of data for a metadata management practice, right? We or and something like local data marts or local reporting or ad hoc reporting, right, may not require high amount of governance, as it's restricted to this one function, and does not impact the overall enterprise. So That way it's because considering the sheer number of end users who are using that report is very small in terms of size, right? We need not govern it, and because there's no involvement from the steering committee on these reports as well, right? So we can just leave it or tackle it a little later. And also when you talk about exploratory data, like raw data sets, one-off analysis, right? So all of them again are lowly governed, and can be looked at a later stage once we are done with prioritizing or completing the one that we have identified as priorities, as it has heavy significance with respect to the business in the organization. um, and there also needs to be a realistic business strategy. So we looked at some of the use cases before, right? So rather than going for a big bang approach and get lost in it, uh, we need to look at one chunk, or that one unit, right? That 0 to 1 exercise that we want to embark upon initially, get it finalized, get it done with, demonstrate that win, receive, make a testimonial out of it, if you may, and then look at the other units, or the 1 to 10 exercise after that, right? So uh, the focus here should you know be proper delivery or a delight to for a particular department, so that you know we have that buy-in, and we have that focus, narrowed focus, in order to get things right, rather than look at everything within an enterprise and going for a big bang and get lost, right? So this slide is also more about the why of metadata management, but we need to also be realistic, because some of the although the priority may be a business case, but we may not have the right maturity in terms of metadata management to achieve that, right? So we need to first plan out what we are doing with respect to metadata management, and then once we have that baseline metadata management, we can then look at, okay, some of the use cases that we can tackle, right? So for example, if we can take up customer first, right? Because customer is an entity that kind of impacts a lot of different departments: sales, marketing, and then progress further. It'll make things easier for everyone, but at the same time we will be able to see value out of it, because customer as a unit impacts many different departments. So once we have the strategy and the proper use case, and we've identified the few departments and source systems and all of that, we can carry out an implementation work plan. So this is just an example, right? To kind of you know understand that what we'll be tackling and how, and what is the measurement around it. So we need to define all of that, and it's very important to have expected it's important to have defined outcomes, and it's important to measure what how we are um how we are faring with respect to the outcome that we have defined. And again, if we get that 0 to 1 right, and if we do that right iteratively, then we can scale it up. Once we have that initial unit which is right. So we are talking about uh, you know uh, scoping, defining, data capture, implement and validate, and then go on to train and then support, and then do all of it on an iterative basis for all the different use cases. as it maps out to different departments within an organization. So in order, we looked at some of the strategies, we looked at different use cases, we looked at what is metadata, what is business metadata and technical metadata. But it's very important to evaluate the right tool as well, because that will be the starting step to uh, realize the metadata management goal, right? So when evaluating the tool, these are a few criterion that we should look at, right? For example, metadata repositories, right? These are used to document and manage metadata and to perform analysis using metadata. So uh, organizations can also use report repositories to publish information about reusable assets, which enables users to browse metadata during lifecycle activities such as design, testing, and release management. We should also look at if it has data lineage capabilities or not, which kind of specifies the data's origin and where it moves over time. uh, Data lineage also describes what happens to data as it goes through diverse systems and processes, and can help with analyzing how information is used and tracking the flow of information across the enterprise, serving various purposes. um, we should look at the impact analysis capabilities of the tool, which conveys extensive details about dependencies of information or the impact of change uh, you know propagated from a data source. And this relates to the chess example that we looked at sometime before, in the webinar, where uh, how a change in say uh, a row, right, an addition of a row, or um, you know an addition of an extra attribute can cause a downstream or upstream impact within the system is to be looked at. We should also look at rule management, right, which is again automates the information enforcement of business rules that are tied to data elements and associated metadata. This capability supports dedicated interfaces for the creation of and the execution of information stewardship for effective governance, right? We should so there may be a lot of different source systems, so it's very important to look at the connectivity part of the tool as well. Does it have techniques of bridges for different data sources, like you know um, modeling tools or database management systems, ERP systems, different file formats, right? So typically, if you are to consider the entire landscape for an organization, in terms of structured, unstructured, and semi-structured data, right? So the tool should have that connectivity so that it can ingest the metadata, and then we can start off our exercise in terms of managing that metadata better. So thank you for hearing me today. If you are interested or would like to meet us virtually, uh, please feel free to drop us an email on info@royalcyber.com. Right. So with that said, let us now look at some of the questions we received today. Right. So over to you, Madhu.